What happens when two sisters fall in love with the same man and their father orchestrates one of the most shocking deceptions in biblical history? Tonight, we're diving deep into the complete story of Rachel and Leah, a tale of jealousy, manipulation, and desperate competition that would tear apart a family and shape the destiny of an entire nation. You've heard fragments of this story before, but I guarantee you've never heard it told like this, with all the raw emotions, the bitter rivalries, and the surprising twists that make this one of the most dramatic love triangles ever recorded. Before we dive in, if you're new to this channel, consider hitting that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is. We'd love to hear from you. So, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? Prophetic setup. Tears fall into the dust beside a well in Haran. Jacob weeps openly, his shoulders shaking with emotion he cannot contain. This moment will echo through centuries. The woman before him carries beauty that seems to glow in the afternoon sun. Her name is Rachel, and she will become both his greatest love and the source of his deepest pain. But this story reaches beyond romance. It unfolds as a tale of sisters locked in silent battle, each fighting for the same man's heart. Their struggle will birth a nation. Their rivalry will shape the destiny of 12 tribes. Their children will carry both blessing and burden into generations yet unborn. Jacob's tears at this well mark more than love at first sight. They signal the beginning of a family drama that mirrors the patterns already woven through his bloodline. Favoritism runs like a river through his ancestry. His grandfather Abraham favored Isaac over Ishmael. His father Isaac chose Esau over him. Now Jacob stands ready to repeat the cycle, though he does not yet know it. The well where Rachel waters her father's sheep sits in Mesopotamian territory, far from Jacob's homeland. He has fled here to escape his brother's rage, carrying only the clothes on his back and a divine promise whispered in dreams. He seeks refuge in the house of Laban, his mother's brother. Instead, he finds love that will cost him 14 years of labor and a lifetime of heartache. Rachel emerges from this first meeting as confident and capable. She tends sheep with the skill of someone born to the work. Her father Laban owns large flocks, and she manages them with authority that speaks of trust earned through competence. She moves with purpose, unaware that her presence has stopped time for the stranger watching from beside the well. Behind her, unseen in this moment, walks her older sister Leah. History will remember Leah as the unwanted wife, the replacement bride, the woman with weak eyes who bore children to earn love that never came. But at this well, she remains invisible, living in her younger sister's shadow as she has done since childhood. Her story waits to unfold in darkness and deception. Jacob comes from a family where divine encounters shape destinies. His grandfather walked with angels. His father received the blessing of continuation. Jacob himself has wrestled with the sacred and emerged transformed, though that transformation still lies ahead. The women he is about to meet will carry their own relationship with the divine, though expressed through motherhood rather than midnight struggles. The setting speaks of divine orchestration. Wells in the ancient world serve as meeting places where destinies intersect. Abraham's servant found Rebekah, Jacob's mother, beside a well. Now Jacob finds Rachel in the same manner. The pattern suggests purpose beyond coincidence, as if the Almighty draws his people together at these sources of life-giving water. Laban's household represents prosperity in Haran. His flocks number in the thousands, his servants work efficiently, and his daughters move with the confidence of women from a successful family. Yet beneath this surface prosperity lurk the same deceptions that plague Jacob's own lineage. Father and nephew will prove well-matched in trickery, though Jacob enters this relationship as the unsuspecting victim rather than the perpetrator. The ancient lands of Mesopotamia stretch vast and fertile around them. This region cradles civilization itself, nurturing the early cities and kingdoms that will rise and fall across the centuries. Rivers flow abundantly here, providing the water that makes agriculture possible and wealth attainable. Laban has chosen his location well, settling where sheep thrive and shepherds prosper. Rachel's beauty captures attention immediately, but her competence holds it. She manages livestock with skill that suggests years of experience. Her father trusts her with valuable animals, indicating both her capability and his confidence in her judgment. She has learned to navigate a world where women must prove their worth through action rather than expectation. The customs of Haran will soon entangle Jacob in ways he cannot foresee. Marriage practices here differ from those of his homeland. The older daughter marries before the younger, regardless of personal preference or romantic attachment. This tradition will become the weapon Laban uses to reshape Jacob's future, turning love into labor and dreams into decades of service. Divine purpose threads through this encounter, though its full meaning remains hidden from the participants. Rachel will struggle with barrenness for years before bearing the son who becomes Jacob's favorite. Leah will birth 6 sons and a daughter, creating the foundation for most of the 12 tribes. Their competition will drive the expansion of Jacob's family in ways that serve the divine plan while causing intense personal suffering. Jacob's weeping at the well carries prophetic weight. These tears of joy will multiply into tears of frustration, disappointment, and grief throughout the coming decades. He weeps now because love has found him unexpectedly. He will weep again when deception replaces his bride on his wedding night. He will weep when Rachel remains barren while Leah bears child after child. He will weep most bitterly when Rachel dies, giving birth beside a lonely road. The sun begins to set over Haran as this first encounter draws to a close. Rachel must return home with her sheep, carrying news of the stranger who helped her water the flocks. Jacob follows, his heart already committed to a woman he met only hours before. Neither realizes they have just set in motion events that will define their lives and echo through history. The well beside which they met will fade into memory, but its significance will endure. Here began the story of 2 sisters whose rivalry shaped a nation. Jacob's flight from Esau. The blessing weighs heavy on Jacob's shoulders as he flees southward from his father's house. Behind him lies a lifetime of second place, of watching his twin brother Esau receive their father's favor while he remained the overlooked younger son. Behind him also lies the most audacious deception of his life, a scheme that transformed him from ignored sibling to heir of divine promise in a single afternoon. The plan belonged to his mother, Rebekah. She conceived it in desperation when she overheard Isaac preparing to bless Esau before his death. The oracle she received during her difficult pregnancy had promised that the older would serve the younger, but decades had passed with no sign of that promise coming true. Esau remained Isaac's favored hunter, the strong son who brought fresh game and received his father's affection. Jacob stayed close to the tents, quiet and overlooked, skilled in domestic matters that earned little praise from his warrior father. Rebekah acted when she realized Isaac intended to bestow the blessing of firstborn inheritance upon Esau. She called Jacob quickly and outlined her strategy. They would prepare Isaac's favorite meal while Esau hunted in the fields. Jacob would wear Esau's clothes and cover his smooth skin with goat hair to mimic his brother's rough texture. In Isaac's blindness and age, the deception might succeed. Jacob hesitated initially, knowing the consequences of failure. If Isaac discovered the trick, he would receive a curse instead of blessing. But Rebekah pressed him forward, promising to bear any curse that fell upon him. Her urgency convinced him that this moment would not come again. Esau would return soon from hunting, and the opportunity would vanish forever. The deception unfolded carefully. Jacob killed young goats and prepared the savory stew Isaac loved. He donned Esau's garments, still carrying the scent of the outdoors that his brother wore naturally. The goatskin covered his hands and neck, creating the rough texture Isaac expected from his firstborn son. Rebekah coached him in Esau's manner of speech, though Jacob's voice remained his greatest vulnerability in maintaining the disguise. Isaac suspected something when Jacob entered the tent. The voice did not sound quite right, and the speed of the hunt seemed unusual. Esau typically spent hours tracking game, but Jacob claimed to have succeeded quickly through divine blessing. Isaac called him closer, running weathered hands over the false skin that covered Jacob's arms and neck. The texture convinced him where the voice had failed. The blessing flowed forth with power that surprised them both. Isaac spoke of dew from heaven and fatness of earth, of abundance in grain and wine. He declared that nations would bow down to Jacob and that his brothers would serve him. Most importantly, he pronounced the continuation of the divine covenant. the promise that had passed from Abraham to Isaac and now to Jacob. The words carried weight beyond their immediate meaning, establishing spiritual inheritance that could never be revoked. Esau returned from hunting to discover his birthright stolen for the second time. Years earlier, Jacob had purchased the birthright with a bowl of stew, trading Esau's exhaustion for his inheritance rights. Now Jacob had claimed the blessing itself, taking not just position but also the spiritual legacy their family had carried for generations. Esau's rage shook the tent walls as he realized the full scope of his loss. Isaac trembled when he understood how completely he had been deceived. Yet he could not retract the blessing once spoken. The words had been pronounced in faith and sealed by divine authority. They belonged to Jacob now, regardless of how he had obtained them. Isaac confirmed the blessing's permanence even as Esau wept and pleaded for some portion of favor. Esau received a blessing of his own, but it carried conflict rather than promise. Isaac prophesied that Esau would live by the sword and serve his brother, though he would eventually break free from that servitude. The blessing acknowledged Esau's strength while confirming his subordinate position. It offered hope for future independence, but provided no immediate comfort for his loss. The aftermath erupted in threats of violence. Esau declared his intention to kill Jacob after their father's death, reasoning that family obligation prevented immediate action but not future revenge. His anger burned with the intensity of betrayal, fueled not just by the stolen blessing, but by years of seeing his quieter brother receive their mother's obvious preference. The household could no longer contain both brothers safely. Rebekah learned of Esau's threats through household servants who overheard his bitter words. She moved quickly to protect her favored son, going to Isaac with a request that seemed routine but served her deeper purpose. She complained about the local women Esau had married, expressing concern that Jacob might make similar choices if he remained in Canaan. Better that he travel to Mesopotamia to find a wife among their relatives in Haran. Isaac agreed to send Jacob away, though he understood the true reason for the journey. He gave Jacob additional blessing before departure, confirming the covenant promises and commissioning him to multiply into a great nation. The blessing acknowledged Jacob as the chosen heir, despite the deceptive means by which he had obtained that position. Divine purpose moved through human scheming, using even trickery to accomplish its will. Jacob departed with little more than travel provisions and his father's staff. Wealth would not accompany him into exile. Instead, he carried only the promise of divine favor and the hope of eventual return. The journey northward would take weeks through territory that held both promise and danger. Robbers frequented the trade routes, and wild animals posed constant threats to solitary travelers. The pattern of deception that marked this blessing would follow Jacob throughout his journey. He had learned to achieve his goals through cunning rather than strength, and that approach would serve him in his dealings with Laban. Yet, he would also discover that others could match his trickery, turning his own methods against him in ways he had never anticipated. The deceiver would himself be deceived, paying for his cleverness with decades of labor and heartache. Divine encounters awaited him on the road to Haran. The God of his fathers would appear to him in dreams and visions, confirming the covenant promises despite his flawed character. Jacob would wrestle with angels and emerge transformed, though that transformation would come gradually through years of struggle rather than immediate change. The journey that began in deception would end in blessing, but the path between would prove longer and more difficult than he could imagine. Arrival in Haran, meeting Rachel. The sun climbs toward midday as Jacob approaches the outskirts of Haran. Weeks of walking have worn his sandals thin and darkened his skin to the color of leather. His staff, inherited from his father Isaac, has become both walking aid and constant companion across the dusty miles. The divine dream at Bethel sustains his spirit, but his body aches with the weariness of long travel through unfamiliar territory. A well appears ahead, carved from local stone and surrounded by the activity that marks gathering places in this region. 3 flocks of sheep rest nearby, their shepherds waiting in the shade while the largest stones remain positioned over the well's mouth. The custom here requires multiple hands to move these heavy barriers, ensuring that water access remains communal rather than individual. Jacob recognizes this practice from his grandfather Abraham's stories about Mesopotamian customs. The shepherds greet him with the cautious friendliness shown to strangers. They identify themselves as men from Haran, confirming that Jacob has reached his destination after weeks of travel. When he mentions Laban's name, their faces brighten with recognition. They know him well as a prosperous sheep owner whose flocks number among the largest in the region. His reputation for shrewd business dealings has spread throughout the local community. "We know Laban well," they respond to Jacob's inquiry. "See, there comes Rachel, his daughter, with the sheep." Um, they point toward a figure approaching from the east, leading a substantial flock across the grasslands. Even at distance, her confident stride marks her as someone comfortable with authority and responsibility. Rachel draws closer, and Jacob feels his breath catch in his throat. Beauty radiates from her like warmth from a fire. Her dark hair streams behind her as she walks, and her eyes carry intelligence that matches her obvious competence with livestock. She moves with purpose and grace, every step revealing someone who has earned respect through skill rather than merely inherited it through birth. Her sheep follow obediently, evidence of careful training and patient handling. The flock appears well-fed and healthy, their wool thick and their movements alert. Rachel's management of these valuable animals speaks to abilities that extend beyond mere shepherding into the realm of livestock expertise. Her father clearly trusts her with significant portions of his wealth. Jacob watches her approach with growing amazement. This woman represents everything he had hoped to find in Haran. Beauty combines with competence, strength balances with femininity, and her obvious connection to Laban's household solves his need for proper family introduction. The divine hand that guided him to this well has provided beyond his expectations. When Rachel reaches the well, Jacob steps forward with energy he has not felt since beginning his journey. The heavy stone that typically requires multiple men to move yields to his strength, driven by determination to assist this remarkable woman. The other shepherds watch with surprise as he single-handedly unveils the water source, demonstrating power that comes from more than physical ability alone. Rachel expresses gratitude for his help, her voice carrying warmth that matches the kindness in her eyes. Jacob offers to water her sheep personally, taking over the laborious task of drawing water and filling the troughs. His actions go beyond courtesy into the realm of service, driven by attraction that grows stronger with each moment spent in her presence. The sheep drink deeply while Rachel and Jacob speak. She tells him of her family, confirming that she is indeed Laban's daughter and that her father prospers in the livestock business. Her manner combines confidence with approachability, revealing someone comfortable with strangers yet cautious about revealing too much personal information too quickly. Jacob responds by identifying himself as Isaac's son and Rebekah's child, establishing his family connection to her household. The revelation transforms Rachel's expression from polite interest to genuine excitement. She has heard stories of her aunt Rebekah from childhood, tales of the woman who left Haran years ago to marry Isaac in Canaan. Jacob's arrival represents living proof of those family legends. The moment of recognition overwhelms Jacob's composure. Tears stream down his face as he realizes that divine providence has guided him precisely where he needed to be. The weeping comes from relief, gratitude, and growing love all mixed together. He has found family in a foreign land, discovered beauty beyond imagination, and experienced the first hint that his exile might contain blessings rather than only hardship. Rachel responds to his emotion with understanding rather than alarm. She has heard enough family stories to recognize the significance of this meeting. Her aunt Rebekah left home decades ago to marry a man she had never seen, trusting divine guidance and family arrangement. Now, Rebekah's son appears beside their well, creating connections that span generations and geographical distance. Jacob explains his situation carefully. He describes his journey from Canaan and his need for sanctuary in Laban's household. He mentions his willingness to work for his keep, recognizing that hospitality, even among family members, requires contribution rather than mere consumption. His years helping manage Isaac's flocks have prepared him for whatever labor Laban might require. Rachel listens with growing interest to Jacob's account. His obvious capability with her sheep, Combined with his family connection, makes him a potentially valuable addition to her father's household. Skilled shepherds command respect in this region, and Jacob has demonstrated both strength and gentleness in handling her animals. Her father will appreciate both his family ties and his practical abilities. The conversation reveals Rachel's own position within Laban's family structure. She speaks with authority about her father's business operations, suggesting involvement that goes beyond typical women's roles in household management. Laban appears to value her judgment and trust her with significant responsibilities. This dynamic will prove important in the relationships that develop within the household. Other aspects of the family emerge through their discussion. Rachel mentions her older sister Leah, describing her briefly but without the enthusiasm she reserves for discussing their father's sheep. The casual reference hints at family dynamics that Jacob cannot yet understand, relationships that will profoundly impact his future but remain hidden beneath the surface of polite conversation. The afternoon advances while they continue talking beside the well. Rachel must return home with her sheep before evening, and Jacob needs introduction to Laban's household. Their conversation has established mutual interest and family connection, but the formal arrangements for his stay require negotiation with her father. She invites him to accompany her home, beginning the next phase of his integration into Mesopotamian life. The journey to Laban's house passes quickly as Rachel shares information about local customs and her family's position in the community. Jacob learns that Laban commands respect throughout Haran for his business acumen and his fair treatment of servants. His household operates efficiently, his flocks multiply consistently, and his daughters have been raised to contribute meaningfully to family prosperity. As they approach Laban's dwelling, Jacob realizes his life is about to change dramatically. The lonely exile who arrived at the well this morning will sleep tonight as an honored family member in a prosperous household. More importantly, he will sleep knowing that he has found the woman he wants to marry, though the path to that goal remains uncertain and potentially complicated. The 7 years of service, love turns into labor. Laban's greeting exceeds Jacob's expectations in warmth and generosity. The older man embraces his nephew with genuine affection, welcoming him as both family member and honored guest. "You are indeed my bone and my flesh," Laban declares, invoking the ancient formula that establishes kinship obligations and privileges. Jacob finds himself immediately integrated into the household's daily rhythms, assigned comfortable quarters, and invited to participate in family meals. The first month passes quickly as Jacob adapts to Mesopotamian customs and demonstrates his value to Laban's operations. His expertise with sheep becomes apparent immediately. The flocks respond to his handling with unusual docility, and his eye for disease and injury proves exceptionally sharp. Laban recognizes that divine favor accompanies his nephew, blessing the livestock under Jacob's care with unusual health and productivity. Rachel's presence brightens every day for Jacob. She manages her assigned flocks with skill that matches his own, creating opportunities for them to work together in the fields. Their conversations reveal shared interests in animal husbandry and mutual respect for each other's competence. Love deepens through daily contact, growing from initial attraction into mature affection based on genuine compatibility. Leah remains more distant during these early weeks. Her duties keep her closer to the household, managing domestic operations while Rachel handles fieldwork. Jacob sees her regularly at meals and family gatherings, noting her quiet competence and gentle manner, but his attention focuses entirely on Rachel. Leah's presence registers as pleasant background rather than compelling foreground in his daily experience. The arrangement satisfies everyone initially. Jacob contributes valuable labor while receiving food, shelter, and family acceptance. Laban gains a skilled manager whose divine favor enhances overall prosperity. Rachel enjoys the company of someone who appreciates both her beauty and her abilities. Even Leah benefits from reduced pressure to find a husband immediately, since Jacob's presence provides family protection and economic stability. But Laban's business instincts eventually assert themselves. After Jacob has worked a full month without formal compensation, Laban approaches him with what appears to be generous concern. "Because you are my relative," Should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what should your wages be? The question seems considerate, but it also transforms Jacob's status from family guest to hired employee. Jacob realizes this moment will determine his future in Haran. He could request monetary payment and eventually earn enough to return home wealthy. He could ask for a portion of the flocks, building his own herds through patient accumulation. Instead, love compels him toward a different choice entirely. I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter, he responds, making his desires explicit. The proposal contains both boldness and wisdom. Jacob acknowledges his poverty by offering labor instead of the bride price, typically expected for marriage. 7 years represents substantial compensation, demonstrating serious commitment rather than casual interest. Most importantly, he specifies Rachel clearly, leaving no room for ambiguity about which daughter he desires to marry. Laban considers the offer carefully before responding. 7 years of skilled labor from someone with Jacobilities represents enormous value, potentially worth more than any monetary bride price he might receive. Additionally, keeping Rachel unmarried for 7 years allows him to benefit from her continued contributions to the household operations. The arrangement serves his interests while appearing to serve Jacob's as well. It is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Laban finally agrees, accepting the proposal with words that seem favorable but actually commit him to very little. He has not explicitly promised Rachel to Jacob, merely stated preference for family marriage over outside arrangements. The ambiguous language will prove significant later, though Jacob understands it as binding agreement. The 7 years begin with joy and purpose for Jacob. Every sunrise brings him closer to marriage with the woman he loves. Every task becomes meaningful because it contributes to their shared future. The work feels light because of his motivation, time passing quickly when measured against the magnitude of his goal. Scripture records that the years seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her. Rachel's response to the arrangement appears positive, though Mesopotamian customs limit her direct participation in marriage negotiations. She continues working alongside Jacob in the fields, their relationship deepening through shared labor and common interests. Their conversations reveal mutual planning for married life, discussions of future children, and dreams of prosperity together. She seems to accept the 7-year engagement as appropriate preparation for their union. Leah's position becomes more complicated during this period. As the older sister, custom dictates that she should marry before Rachel, but Jacob's specific request for Rachel threatens that traditional order. Laban faces pressure from community expectations while managing his daughter's contrasting situations. Leah's unmarried status begins to appear problematic as years pass without suitable proposals from other men. The household prospers remarkably during Jacob's 7 years of service. The flocks multiply beyond previous rates, diseases diminish among the animals, and overall productivity increases substantially. Laban's wealth expands in ways that coincide directly with Jacob's presence and management. The divine blessing promised to Abraham's descendants appears to extend to those who deal fairly with his family. Jacob's reputation spreads throughout Haran as his success becomes apparent. Other livestock owners notice Laban's unusual prosperity and correctly attribute much of it to his nephew's abilities. Jacob could potentially negotiate employment elsewhere for better terms, but his commitment to Rachel keeps him faithful to their agreement despite opportunities for personal advancement. The relationship between Jacob and Rachel develops layers of intimacy appropriate to their betrothed status. They plan their future household together, discussing everything from livestock management to child-rearing philosophies. Rachel shares her knowledge of local customs and community relationships that will serve Jacob well as a permanent resident of Haran. Their compatibility extends beyond physical attraction into genuine partnership. Yet challenges emerge as the 7 years progress. Laban's business practices reveal themselves as increasingly sharp, sometimes crossing the line into deception. He changes the terms of agreements when circumstances favor him, interprets contracts to his own advantage, and shows little concern for fairness when profit opportunities arise. Jacob begins to recognize patterns that should concern him about his future father-in-law's character. Community pressure regarding Leah's unmarried status intensifies as she ages beyond typical marriage years. Whispers suggest that something must be wrong with her to remain single so long, despite her obvious domestic skills and gentle nature. The situation creates tension within the household as Laban struggles to balance tradition, community expectations, and economic advantage. Rachel's beauty matures during these 7 years, but more importantly, her character develops through sustained relationship with Jacob. She demonstrates loyalty, intelligence, and strength that confirm Jacob's choice as wise beyond mere physical attraction. Their love grows deeper through testing and time, creating foundations that should sustain them through future challenges. As the 7th year approaches its end, anticipation builds throughout the household. Jacob counts days with increasing excitement, finally able to envision the completion of his long labor and the beginning of married life. Rachel makes preparations for their wedding and future household establishment. Laban makes preparations too, though his plans remain hidden from everyone except himself. The stage is set for the dramatic wedding deception that will transform all their lives. Jacob's faithful service has earned him the right to claim his bride, but Laban's schemes will turn triumph into tragedy. The 7 years that pass like days in anticipation will be followed by 7 more years of labor, doubling Jacob's service and complicating his family relationships in ways none of them can foresee. Leah in the shadows. The unwanted sister Leah watches her younger sister from the periphery of attention, occupying spaces where observation comes without participation. Her position as firstborn daughter should guarantee certain privileges, but Rachel's striking beauty overshadows traditional advantages of birth order. Throughout their childhood, visitors to Laban's house notice Rachel immediately, while Leah blends into background furnishings, present but unremarkable. The scripture describes Leah's eyes as weak, though scholars debate whether this indicates poor vision, lacking luster, or simply unremarkable appearance, compared to Rachel's radiant beauty. Whatever the precise meaning, the description establishes Leah as the sister whose physical attributes fail to capture attention. In a culture where women's value often depends heavily on beauty, this disadvantage shapes her entire existence. Laban's favoritism toward Rachel appears in countless small ways throughout their upbringing. He assigns Rachel the prestigious task of managing the sheep, work that requires trust and demonstrates his confidence in her abilities. Leah receives household duties that keep her close to home, managing domestic operations that prove equally valuable but attract less notice from the community. Her contributions remain essential yet invisible. The difference in treatment extends beyond work assignments into emotional connection. Laban speaks to Rachel with pride and affection, discussing business decisions and seeking her opinions on livestock matters. His conversations with Leah focus on practical necessities, lacking the warmth he reserves for his younger daughter. She learns early that love must be earned through service rather than expected through birth order. Community perception reinforces the family dynamic. When visitors come to negotiate business with Laban, they comment favorably on Rachel's appearance and capabilities. Leah receives polite acknowledgement of her domestic skills, but compliments remain perfunctory rather than enthusiastic. She develops the protective shell that shields sensitive people from constant comparison to more favored siblings. Marriage prospects reflect the sisters' contrasting positions within the community. Young men seeking wives inquire about Rachel regularly, attracted by her beauty and her father's obvious preference for her. Leah receives fewer inquiries, and those she does receive often come from men seeking economic advantage through connection to Laban's household, rather than from genuine attraction to her personally. The arrival of Jacob transforms the household dynamics dramatically, but in Leah's favor. His immediate fascination with Rachel becomes apparent to everyone, including Leah herself. She watches him gaze at her sister with undisguised adoration, displaying the kind of devoted attention she has never received from any man. His presence emphasizes rather than diminishes her position as the overlooked daughter. Leah observes Jacob's courtship of Rachel with complex emotions that mix genuine happiness for her sister with personal disappointment. She recognizes Rachel's joy in receiving such devoted attention from a handsome and capable man. Simultaneously, she cannot help wondering whether any man will ever look at her with similar devotion. The contrast between their romantic prospects becomes painfully clear. During Jacob's 7 years of service, Leah's situation grows increasingly difficult. Custom dictates that older daughters marry before younger ones, but Jacob's specific request for Rachel threatens that traditional order. Laban faces community pressure to arrange Leah's marriage first, yet he cannot risk losing Jacob's valuable labor by refusing his request outright. The conflict places Leah in an impossible position. Her age becomes a source of community speculation as years pass without marriage arrangements. In a culture where women typically marry young, Leah's extended singleness raises questions about her desirability and her father's ability to arrange suitable matches. Whispered conversations suggest that something must be wrong with the older daughter of such a prosperous household. Leah develops inner strength through years of secondary status, learning to find satisfaction in her own accomplishments rather than external validation. Her domestic management skills exceed those of most women her age, and her quiet competence keeps the household running smoothly while Rachel works in the fields. She creates value through different gifts than her sister possesses. The loneliness of her position deepens as she watches Jacob and Rachel's relationship develop over the years. Their obvious compatibility and growing affection remind her daily of her own isolation. She longs for someone to appreciate her gentle nature and capable hands, but potential suitors continue seeking introductions to Rachel instead of her. Laban's dilemma regarding his daughters creates tension throughout the household. He benefits enormously from Jacob's labor and cannot afford to lose such a valuable worker. Yet, community expectations regarding marriage order place pressure on him to find Leah a husband before allowing Rachel to marry. His solution, when it comes, will satisfy neither daughter while serving his own interests perfectly. Leah's religious life provides some comfort during these difficult years. She maintains devotion to the household gods and participates faithfully in family religious observances. Her prayers often focus on requests for a husband who will value her qualities and give her the children that represent women's primary source of security and status in ancient society. The approaching end of Jacob's 7 years of service creates anticipation throughout the household, but Leah's feelings remain complicated. Rachel's joy in her approaching marriage highlights Leah's own continued singleness. The wedding preparations emphasize rather than diminish the contrast between the sisters' situations. Leah participates in the preparations while knowing they celebrate her sister's triumph over her own defeat. Community expectations regarding the marriage order intensify as Jacob's service nears completion. Traditional voices insist that Leah must marry first, but no suitable husband appears to solve the dilemma. Laban's reputation for sharp dealing may discourage some potential suitors, while Leah's own advanced age reduces her attractiveness in the marriage market. Leah's emotional state during this period requires careful management of competing desires. She genuinely loves her sister and wants Rachel to experience happiness in marriage. Simultaneously, she cannot suppress her own longing for similar joy and security. The internal conflict between sisterly affection and personal disappointment creates stress that shows in her increasingly quiet demeanor. The stage is set for Laban's deceptive solution to his dilemma. He has promised Rachel to Jacob but cannot ignore community pressure regarding marriage order. His scheme will attempt to satisfy both obligations while maximizing his own benefit through additional years of Jacob's labor. Leah will become the unwitting instrument of her father's deception, gaining the husband she desires through methods that ensure his resentment rather than his love. Her participation in the coming deception will be passive rather than active. She will follow her father's instructions out of obedience and desperate hope for marriage, but the consequences will haunt her for the rest of her life. The wedding night that should bring her joy will instead begin decades of competition with her sister for their shared husband's affection. The wedding deception, night of the switch. The wedding feast blazes with celebration as Haran's community gathers to honor Jacob's marriage to Laban's daughter. 7 years of faithful service deserve recognition, and Laban spares no expense in hosting the festivities. Wine flows abundantly, music fills the air, and the finest foods grace tables laden with abundance. Jacob moves through the celebration with joy that radiates from his face, finally able to claim the bride he has earned through years of patient labor. Mesopotamian wedding customs create the perfect environment for Laban's deception. Brides remain heavily veiled throughout the ceremony, hidden from view until the marriage is consummated. The practice protects feminine modesty while building anticipation for the groom's first clear sight of his wife. Darkness provides additional concealment as evening ceremonies transition into nighttime celebrations before the couple retires to the bridal chamber. The bride sits silent and motionless throughout the feast, covered in layers of fabric that disguise her identity completely. Guests assume they celebrate Rachel's marriage, but the figure beneath the veils is Leah, trembling with nervousness and desperate hope. She has agreed to participate in her father's scheme, driven by her own longing for marriage and her trust in Laban's promises about Jacob's eventual acceptance. Jacob's happiness blinds him to details that might otherwise raise suspicions. His beloved bride seems unusually quiet, but wedding nerves could explain such behavior. The heavy veiling appears traditional and appropriate, protecting Rachel's modesty as custom demands. His wine consumption, encouraged by celebratory toasts throughout the evening, further reduces his ability to detect deception. Laban orchestrates the switch with masterful attention to detail. He has prepared Leah carefully for her role, coaching her in mannerisms that might suggest Rachel's identity without requiring speech. The sisters' similar heights and builds help maintain the illusion under concealing garments. Most importantly, he ensures that Jacob consumes enough wine to impair his judgment without rendering him incapable of consummating the marriage. The celebration continues deep into the night, following patterns established by generations of Mesopotamian weddings. Guests feast and drink while musicians provide entertainment, creating festive atmosphere that masks any nervousness from the bride's family. Laban accepts congratulations on his daughter's marriage with satisfaction that his scheme proceeds smoothly. When the time comes for the couple to retire, torch-bearing servants escort them to the bridal chamber. The room has been prepared with fine linens and aromatic oils, creating an atmosphere worthy of Jacob's long-awaited wedding night. Flickering flames cast dancing shadows that provide romantic ambiance while further concealing the bride's true identity beneath her layers of veiling. The deception reaches its climax as Jacob finally approaches his heavily covered bride. Years of anticipation culminate in this moment when he can finally claim Rachel as his wife. His love and desire, intensified by 7 years of waiting, overcome any lingering doubts about her unusual silence or the strange nervousness he senses beneath her coverings. Leah submits to the consummation with emotions that mix terror, hope, and desperate love. She has dreamed of this intimacy for years, though never imagining it would come through deception. Her participation makes her complicit in the fraud, but her father has convinced her that Jacob will learn to love her once the marriage is completed. She clings to this hope as she surrenders her virginity to a man who believes she is someone else. The marriage is consummated in darkness, both literal and figurative. Jacob possesses the woman he believes is Rachel, unaware that his years of faithful service have purchased him the wrong bride. The physical union creates legal marriage according to local customs, binding him to Leah, regardless of the deception involved in their joining. Dawn breaks with cruel revelation as morning light penetrates the bridal chamber. Jacob awakens to find Leah beside him instead of Rachel, her face peaceful in sleep but utterly wrong in his bed. The shock strikes him like physical blow, stealing his breath and flooding his mind with impossible reality. 7 years of labor have been twisted into marriage with the sister he never desired. The discovery shatters more than Jacob's romantic dreams. It destroys his trust in family relationships and reveals the depth of Laban's willingness to deceive even close relatives for personal gain. The uncle who welcomed him warmly has manipulated his love into unwanted marriage, trading on family bonds to accomplish fraud that binds Jacob legally to Leah while keeping his valuable labor tied to the household. Leah awakens to see shock and betrayal in Jacob's eyes rather than the love she had hoped might develop. Her wedding night, which should have brought joy and fulfillment, ends with the painful knowledge that her husband feels trapped rather than blessed by their union. The marriage she has longed for begins with his obvious disappointment in discovering her identity. The weight of participation in deception falls heavily upon Leah as she faces Jacob's stunned reaction. She has gained the husband she desired through methods that ensure his resentment rather than his affection. Her father's promises about Jacob's eventual acceptance seem hollow in the face of his obvious distress at finding himself married to her instead of Rachel. Community awareness of the switch spreads quickly throughout Haran as servants carry news of the morning's discovery. Some express shock at Laban's audacity, while others nod knowingly at his business acumen in securing additional years of Jacob's valuable labor. The deception becomes the subject of whispered conversations throughout the region. Laban's morning appearance in the bridal chamber demonstrates calculated timing designed to present Jacob with accomplished facts rather than negotiable possibilities. He enters with the authority of father and master, ready to justify his actions through appeals to local custom and community expectations. His manner suggests preparation for confrontation rather than surprise at discovery. The justification Laban offers relies on tradition and social pressure rather than honesty about his motivations. It is not done in our country to give the younger before the older, he explains, invoking customs that he could have mentioned 7 years earlier but chose to conceal. The appeal to tradition masks his real desire to retain Jacob's labor for additional years while solving Leah's marriage difficulties. The proposed solution reveals Laban's true genius for manipulation. He offers to give Rachel to Jacob as well, but only after completing the wedding week with Leah and agreeing to serve 7 additional years for the younger daughter. The arrangement traps Jacob between abandoning his true love and doubling his period of servitude to claim her. Jacob's options appear limited by the circumstances Laban has created. Local law recognizes his marriage to Leah as valid regardless of the deception involved. Abandoning her now would violate social expectations and religious obligations toward wives. Claiming Rachel requires accepting Laban's terms for additional service, but refusing means losing her to another suitor who might appear during his absence. The week following the deception passes in uncomfortable adjustment as Jacob fulfills his obligations to Leah while anticipating his marriage to Rachel. The forced intimacy with his unwanted wife creates bonds that complicate his emotions despite his resentment of the circumstances. Leah's gentle nature and obvious devotion begin to earn grudging respect even as his heart remains committed to her sister. Rachel's reaction to the deception remains complex and painful. She has lost her wedding to her sister's substitution, watching Leah claim the marriage she had anticipated for 7 years. Yet she cannot blame her sister entirely, recognizing that Leah participated in their father's scheme rather than initiating it independently. The betrayal comes primarily from Laban rather than from sibling rivalry. The community watches the unfolding drama with fascination and concern. Jacob's situation evokes sympathy from those who appreciate his faithful service and obvious devotion to Rachel. Others focus on the entertainment value of seeing a clever man outwitted by even cleverer manipulation. The events become part of local folklore that will be recounted for generations. Leah's position during this week combines triumph with tragedy. She has achieved marriage to the man she desired, but under circumstances that poison the relationship from its beginning. Her husband's obvious preference for her sister creates constant reminder of her secondary status even within her own marriage. The victory feels hollow when measured against its emotional cost. The legal and religious implications of the double marriage create unprecedented complications for the household. Jacob will become husband to 2 sisters simultaneously, an arrangement that violates Hebrew customs while conforming to Mesopotamian practices. The unique situation will require careful navigation to maintain family harmony and community acceptance. Laban's satisfaction with his scheme becomes apparent as the week progresses. He has solved multiple problems through single deception. Leah is married according to proper birth order, Rachel remains available for additional negotiation, and Jacob's valuable labor is secured for 7 more years. The cost in family relationships seems acceptable compared to the economic benefits achieved. The stage is now set for decades of complicated family relationships. Two sisters will share one husband, creating rivalry that extends beyond romance into competition for children, status, and divine favor. Jacob will learn to navigate between competing demands from wives who represent both his greatest joy and his deepest frustration. The deception that began this week will echo through generations as the 12 tribes emerge from this troubled but divinely blessed union. Jacob's wrath and Rachel's shock. The morning sun reveals more than Leah's identity beside Jacob in the marriage bed. It exposes the complete collapse of trust within a family that had seemed united in purpose and affection. Jacob's rage builds steadily as the full scope of Laban's deception becomes clear, transforming from initial shock into sustained fury that threatens to tear the household apart. Jacob confronts Laban with the righteous anger of someone whose faithful service has been rewarded with betrayal. "What is this you have done to me?" he demands, his voice shaking with emotion barely contained. "Was it not for Rachel that I served with you? Why then have you deceived me?" The questions carry 7 years of accumulated trust that has been shattered in a single night of fraud. Laban meets Jacob's anger with calm calculation, demonstrating the emotional detachment that made his deception possible. He shows no shame about his manipulation, instead presenting it as necessary adherence to local customs that Jacob should have understood from the beginning. His composure in the face of Jacob's fury reveals the depth of his planning and his confidence in the legal protection his scheme provides. The appeal to tradition serves Laban's purposes perfectly while offering Jacob no recourse for justice. It is not done in our country to give the younger before the older. Laban explains with the patience of someone teaching obvious facts to a slow student. The statement implies that Jacob's ignorance of local customs, rather than deliberate deception, created the misunderstanding that led to his disappointment. Jacob recognizes the trap immediately, but cannot escape its legal implications. Mesopotamian law validates his marriage to Leah regardless of the circumstances that created it. The consummation established binding obligations that cannot be dissolved by claims of deception or expressions of personal preference. Laban has used legal customs as weapons to achieve his goals while maintaining technical innocence. The proposed solution reveals Laban's true motivations while appearing to offer generous compromise. Jacob may have Rachel as well, but only after completing the traditional wedding week with Leah and agreeing to serve 7 additional years for the younger daughter. The arrangement doubles Jacob's period of servitude while solving all of Laban's problems through apparent fairness. Rachel's reaction to the morning's revelations combines personal devastation with family loyalty conflicts. She has watched her wedding celebration proceed with her sister as the hidden bride, unknowingly participating in festivities that celebrated her own disappointment. The discovery that she has been excluded from the marriage she had anticipated for 7 years strikes her like bereavement for the living. The sisterly relationship between Rachel and Leah faces unprecedented strain as consequences of the deception emerge. Rachel cannot fully blame Leah for participating in their father's scheme, recognizing her sister's desperate desire for marriage and her obedience to paternal authority. Yet she cannot suppress resentment that Leah accepted benefits that rightfully belonged to her. Leah's position becomes increasingly precarious as the household adjusts to the revelation. Her marriage, achieved through deception, lacks the celebration and family support that should accompany such joyous occasions. Instead, she finds herself apologizing for actions that gave her the husband she had longed for, while knowing that her gain came at her sister's expense. Jacob's internal struggle intensifies as he weighs his limited options. Abandoning Leah would violate his moral obligations toward wives, while failing to recover the 7 years he has already invested in earning Rachel. Accepting Laban's terms for claiming Rachel requires 14 years of total service, doubling his original commitment. Refusing the arrangement means losing Rachel permanently to other suitors. The household servants observe the family crisis with mixture of sympathy and fascination. Jacob's reputation for fairness and competence has earned their respect over 7 years, making his current situation particularly poignant. They recognize Laban's cleverness while questioning the wisdom of alienating such a valuable family member through deception. Community reaction to the deception varies according to individual perspectives on business ethics and family relationships. Some admire Laban's shrewd manipulation of circumstances to achieve maximum advantage. Others express concern about the precedent established by deceiving family members, wondering whether such practices might spread to other business relationships throughout the region. The religious implications of the situation create additional complications for all participants. Divine blessing has clearly accompanied Jacob throughout his 7 years of service, but the deception raises questions about cosmic approval for Laban's methods. Some community members wonder whether supernatural consequences might follow such manipulation of sacred family bonds. Rachel's beauty, which initially attracted Jacob's attention, now serves as constant reminder of what his 7 years of faithful service should have earned him. Her presence in the household emphasizes the gap between expectation and reality created by Laban's switch. Every interaction with her highlights his loss while strengthening his determination to claim her as his rightful bride. The economic dimensions of Laban's deception become apparent as Jacob calculates the true cost of his situation. 14 years of labor represent enormous value, potentially worth more than monetary payments typically exchanged for brides. Laban has effectively sold both daughters while retaining their continued presence in his household through their shared husband. Jacob's decision emerges from careful weighing of impossible alternatives. He cannot abandon Leah without violating moral obligations that define his character. He cannot live without Rachel, whose love has sustained him through 7 years of labor. The only path forward requires accepting Laban's terms, doubling his service commitment while gaining the wife he originally sought. The agreement that follows establishes precedents that will govern the household for years to come. Jacob will serve 7 additional years for Rachel, but may marry her immediately after completing the wedding week with Leah. The arrangement creates polygamous marriage that violates Hebrew customs while conforming to Mesopotamian practices. Rachel accepts the arrangement with mixture of relief and apprehension. She will finally marry the man she loves, but as second wife in a household already complicated by deception and competing loyalties. Her marriage will begin under shadows cast by her sister's prior claim and her father's manipulation of both their romantic futures. The week between the deception's discovery and Rachel's wedding passes in uncomfortable adjustment for everyone involved. Jacob fulfills his obligations to Leah while anticipating his marriage to Rachel. The sisters navigate their changed relationship, now bound together as wives to the same man, rather than competing for his attention as unmarried daughters. Laban's satisfaction with his accomplished deception appears complete as he observes the household settling into its new configuration. He has achieved all his goals through single masterful manipulation. Both daughters married, Jacob's valuable labor secured for 7 more years, and local customs satisfied regarding birth order in marriage arrangements. The stage is set for decades of complex family relationships that will test everyone's capacity for love, forgiveness, and coexistence. The deception that created this situation will echo through all future interactions, creating undercurrents of resentment and competition that affect not only the immediate participants but their children and descendants for generations to come. A household divided, 2 wives, 1 man. The second wedding proceeds with subdued ceremony, lacking the celebratory atmosphere that marked the first deceptive feast. Community members attend out of obligation rather than joy, recognizing the unusual circumstances that necessitate Jacob's marriage to both sisters within a single week. The arrangement satisfies legal requirements while creating domestic complications that everyone understands will persist for years. Rachel finally claims her position as Jacob's wife, but the triumph carries complex emotions that mix relief with apprehension. She has waited 7 years for this moment, yet the marriage begins under shadows cast by deception, family betrayal, and her sister's prior claim to their shared husband. The celebration she had envisioned for years feels hollow when measured against its actual circumstances. Jacob divides his time carefully between his 2 wives, attempting to fulfill obligations to Leah while expressing preference for Rachel that everyone in the household recognizes. His favoritism appears in countless small ways: longer conversations with Rachel, more attentive behavior during shared meals, and obvious pleasure in her company that contrasts with dutiful courtesy toward Leah. The living arrangements reflect the complicated nature of their domestic situation. Both women maintain separate quarters within Laban's large household, requiring Jacob to alternate between them according to schedules that attempt fairness while accommodating his clear preferences. The artificial nature of these arrangements emphasizes the unusual circumstances that created their marriage, rather than allowing natural relationship development. Leah's position becomes increasingly difficult as the reality of polygamous marriage settles into daily routine. Her husband's obvious preference for her sister creates constant reminders of her secondary status, turning every shared meal into potential humiliation and every private moment into comparison with her rival. The marriage she had longed for proves more painful than her previous loneliness. Rachel enjoys advantages that extend beyond Jacob's favoritism into practical household management. Her years working alongside Jacob in the fields created shared experiences and mutual respect that inform their marriage relationship. She understands his work methods and shares his interests in ways that Leah, focused on domestic duties, cannot match. Their compatibility appears in professional collaboration as well as personal affection. The sisters' relationship undergoes fundamental transformation as they adjust to sharing a husband rather than competing for one. Childhood bonds strain under pressures created by romantic rivalry, though neither woman initiated the deception that created their situation. They must navigate between sisterly affection and marital competition while living in close proximity within the same household. Laban observes the domestic dynamics with satisfaction tempered by concern for household harmony. His scheme has achieved its intended economic results, but the emotional complications require careful management to prevent complete family breakdown. He maintains authority over the household while allowing his daughters and son-in-law to establish their own relationship patterns. Servants and field workers adapt to the unusual family structure with varying degrees of success. Some express sympathy for Leah's obvious unhappiness, while others focus on Rachel's beauty and Jacob's clear preference for her. The household staff learn to navigate between competing loyalties as they serve two mistresses who share the same husband. Community perception of the arrangement reflects divided opinions about polygamous marriage and the circumstances that created it. Traditional voices approve of Laban's adherence to birth order customs, while others question the wisdom of forcing marriage through deception. Jacob's reputation remains strong, but questions about his domestic situation persist throughout the region. The economic implications of supporting two wives become apparent as Jacob calculates the costs of his expanded family obligations. Clothing, food, and household goods must be provided for both women according to their status as wives rather than servants. The expenses increase his dependence on Laban's household, while reducing his ability to accumulate independent wealth. Religious observances require careful attention to both wives' participation and status within the family structure. Traditional ceremonies assume single-wife households, forcing adaptations that acknowledge both women's positions without creating obvious favoritism. The complications extend into community religious activities, where the unusual family structure attracts attention and commentary. Jacob's work responsibilities continue throughout these domestic adjustments, requiring him to maintain the high-performance standards that made him valuable to Laban initially. The emotional stress of managing two wives affects his daily productivity, though his commitment to fulfilling his additional 7 years of service keeps him focused on professional obligations. The first months of the dual marriage establish patterns that will govern their relationships for years to come. Jacob spends designated nights with each wife according to schedules that attempt equity, while failing to address the emotional realities of his clear preferences. The mechanical nature of these arrangements emphasizes duty over affection in his relationship with Leah. Leah develops coping strategies that help her manage the pain of being unloved despite being married. She focuses on household management duties that demonstrate her value to the family, maintaining hope that practical contributions might eventually earn the affection that her appearance could not inspire. Her quiet competence keeps the domestic operations running smoothly despite emotional turmoil. Rachel's security in Jacob's affection creates confidence that manifests in various aspects of household life. She participates in decisions about livestock management and field operations, drawing on her years of experience working alongside Jacob. Her influence extends beyond typical women's roles into areas traditionally reserved for male family members. The psychological impact on all three participants becomes apparent as the unusual marriage arrangement settles into routine. Jacob experiences guilt about his inability to love both wives equally, recognizing Leah's good qualities while feeling no romantic attraction toward her. His sense of justice conflicts with his emotional realities, creating internal tension that affects all his relationships. Conversations between the sisters reveal the strain created by their shared husband and competing positions within the household. They attempt to maintain family bonds while acknowledging the fundamental competition that now defines their relationship. Both women understand that their future security depends partly on their ability to bear sons, adding reproductive pressure to romantic rivalry. The household settles into patterns that will persist throughout Jacob's remaining years of service to Laban. Two wives sharing one husband creates tensions that affect everyone from family members to servants to community observers. The deception that initiated this arrangement continues to influence all subsequent relationships, creating undercurrents of resentment and competition that will affect their children and descendants for generations. Divine purposes work through these human complications in ways that none of the participants can foresee. The unusual family structure will produce the 12 sons who become the fathers of Judea's tribes, fulfilling covenant promises through domestic arrangements that seem designed to frustrate rather than bless those involved. The pain of human relationships serves divine plans that extend far beyond individual happiness or family harmony. Leah's sons, a mother's hope for love. The first sign of divine favor toward the unloved wife appears in her womb rather than her husband's affections. Leah conceives quickly after her marriage, while Rachel remains barren despite Jacob's obvious preference for her. The irony becomes apparent to everyone in the household. The woman who receives less love proves more fertile, while the beloved wife cannot conceive the children that would secure her position. Pregnancy brings Leah hope that extends beyond the joy of impending motherhood into dreams of earning Jacob's love through the gift of sons. Sons represent security, continuation, and status in ways that surpass mere romantic affection. If she cannot win Jacob's heart through beauty or charm, perhaps she can claim it through providing the male heirs every man desires for his legacy. The birth of her first son overwhelms Leah with gratitude and strategic hope. She names him Reuben, declaring, "Surely the Lord has looked on my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me." The name combines thanksgiving for divine favor with expectation that Jacob's feelings will change once he recognizes her value as mother of his firstborn son. Reuben's arrival does bring Leah increased respect within the household, though not the romantic love she had hoped to inspire. Jacob acknowledges his obligations as father while maintaining emotional distance from the child's mother. The birth establishes Leah's importance in ways that transcend personal relationships, but her heart continues longing for affection that remains elusive. The community celebrates Reuben's birth with enthusiasm that reflects both his status as Jacob's firstborn and recognition of the divine blessing represented by Leah's fertility. Neighbors and relatives offer congratulations that focus on the continuity provided by male heirs, though careful observers note Jacob's reserved response to becoming a father through his unloved wife. Leah's second pregnancy follows quickly, suggesting continued divine favor toward her despite her husband's emotional neglect. She interprets her fertility as evidence that God sees her suffering and provides compensation through children when human love fails. Each conception strengthens her faith that divine purposes work through her life, even when human relationships disappoint. The birth of her second son deepens Leah's theological understanding of her situation while maintaining her hope for Jacob's eventual affection. She names him Simeon, explaining, Because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also. The name acknowledges her painful reality while expressing confidence in divine response to human suffering. Jacob's reaction to Simeon's birth follows patterns established with Reuben, acknowledgement of paternal obligations combined with continued emotional distance from the children's mother. Two sons should guarantee Leah's security within the household, but they fail to create the romantic bond she continues seeking. Her strategic hope begins shifting from earning love to accepting respect. The third pregnancy arrives as testimony to Leah's continued fertility and divine favor, but also as evidence that her strategy for winning Jacob's love through childbearing has not succeeded. She approaches this birth with mixture of gratitude for divine blessing and resignation about her husband's persistent emotional distance. Motherhood provides fulfillment while failing to solve her romantic loneliness. Levi's birth prompts Leah to name him with hope that seems more desperate than confident. Now, this time my husband will become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons, she declares, using his name to express expectation that 3 male heirs surely must earn Jacob's emotional attachment. The repetition of this hope across multiple births suggests both persistence and growing awareness of its likely futility. The pattern of Leah's naming reveals her psychological journey through multiple pregnancies and births. Each son's name reflects her emotional state at the time of birth, creating a chronicle of hope, disappointment, and gradual acceptance that spans several years. The names become testimonies to both divine favor and human heartbreak experienced simultaneously. Rachel observes her sister's fertility with growing anxiety that mixes genuine happiness for Leah with personal devastation about her own barrenness. Each nephew's birth reminds her of her failure to provide Jacob with the sons he desires and deserves. Her position as favored wife becomes increasingly insecure as Leah's practical value to the family grows through successive births. The household dynamics shift with each of Leah's sons, as children require attention, resources, and space that affect everyone's daily routines. Jacob's responsibilities as father multiply even as his emotional preferences remain unchanged. The growing number of young voices and active bodies transforms the quiet household into bustling family environment. Community perception of the family situation evolves as Leah's sons establish her importance within the household structure. Neighbors who previously pitied her as the unloved wife begin recognizing her significance as mother of multiple heirs. Her status improves through motherhood even as her romantic disappointment continues. Leah's 4th pregnancy occurs against the backdrop of 3 previous failures to win Jacob's love through childbearing. She approaches this birth with different expectations, having learned that divine blessing and human affection operate independently. Her hope shifts from changing Jacob's heart to finding satisfaction in divine favor, regardless of human relationships. The birth of Judah marks a turning point in Leah's emotional journey and theological understanding. She names him with simple gratitude rather than strategic hope. Now I will praise the Lord. The name suggests acceptance of her situation and appreciation for divine blessings that exist independently of human approval. Her focus shifts from seeking love to expressing thankfulness. Jacob's relationship with his growing sons develops along lines that reflect his feelings toward their mother while acknowledging his paternal obligations. He provides for their physical needs and includes them in his daily activities, but his emotional investment remains limited by his resentment toward the circumstances that made him their father. The children sense their father's emotional distance even as they receive adequate care. Leah's identity transforms through motherhood, from unloved wife seeking affection to proven mother deserving respect. 4 sons establish her permanent importance within the family structure, regardless of Jacob's personal feelings. Her strategic thinking evolves from attempting to change her husband's heart to maximizing her own security and her children's advantages. The divine purposes working through Leah's fertility extend beyond immediate family dynamics into the broader scope of covenant promises. Her sons will become fathers of 4 of the 12 tribes, including Judah, whose lineage will produce future kings and ultimately the Messiah. The unloved wife becomes the primary vessel through which divine promises find fulfillment. Rachel's continued barrenness creates increasing tension within the household, as Leah's fertility demonstrates divine favor that contrasts sharply with the beloved wife's reproductive failure. The irony becomes painful for everyone involved. The woman Jacob loves cannot provide the children he needs, while the woman he neglects proves abundantly fertile. The situation sets the stage for desperate measures that will complicate the family relationships even further. Rachel's desperation, envy, and surrogacy. The sight of Leah nursing her fourth son while Rachel's arms remain empty transforms sibling rivalry into desperate anguish that threatens to consume the beloved wife entirely. Four nephews play around their feet, living reminders that her sister has achieved through motherhood the security that beauty and love cannot guarantee. Rachel's barrenness becomes more painful with each of Leah's successful pregnancies. Envy grows like poison in Rachel's heart, transforming her natural sisterly affection into bitter resentment that she struggles to conceal. She loves her nephews individually, but hates what they represent collectively, evidence that divine favor rests upon Leah rather than herself. The theological implications disturb her as much as the practical ones, suggesting that God prefers the unloved wife to the cherished one. The community's changing perception of the sisters reflects harsh realities about women's value in ancient society. Neighbors who once envied Rachel's beauty and Jacob's devotion now whisper about divine judgment on barren wives. Leah, previously pitied as unloved, gains respect through fertility, while Rachel's status diminishes despite her husband's continued preference. Rachel's conversations with Jacob grow increasingly strained as her desperation for children overwhelms all other concerns. She watches him interact with Leah's sons and recognizes his need for heirs, regardless of his romantic preferences. Her inability to provide children threatens her long-term security within the marriage more than any competition from her sister could accomplish. The ancient belief that barrenness indicates divine displeasure adds spiritual torment to Rachel's emotional suffering. She examines her conscience for sins that might explain her condition, performs religious rituals designed to encourage fertility, and prays with intensity born of desperation. Nothing changes her barren state, increasing her sense of cosmic abandonment. Months pass without conception while Leah's children grow and develop personalities that endear them to their father, despite his feelings toward their mother. Rachel observes Jacob teaching his sons about livestock management and recognizes that fatherhood provides him fulfillment that even her love cannot match. Her position as favorite wife means less when she cannot provide the gift he values most. The pressure builds within Rachel until it explodes in confrontation with Jacob that reveals the depth of her desperation. "Give me children, or else I die." She demands with dramatic emphasis that reflects genuine psychological distress rather than mere theatrical overstatement. Her identity as a woman depends so heavily on motherhood that continued barrenness feels equivalent to death itself. Jacob's response reveals his own frustration with their situation and his limits in providing solutions to divine mysteries. "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" he asks, acknowledging that conception lies beyond human control. His answer contains truth, but provides no comfort to his desperate wife's emotional needs. The ancient practice of surrogacy offers Rachel a potential solution to her childlessness, though it requires accepting that another woman will bear children on her behalf. The custom allows barren wives to obtain heirs through their female servants, with offspring legally belonging to the mistress rather than the biological mother. Rachel decides to employ this strategy despite its emotional complications. Bilhah, Rachel's personal maidservant, becomes the instrument through which her mistress attempts to achieve motherhood by proxy. The young woman has served Rachel faithfully for years, earning trust that makes her suitable for such intimate service. Her willingness to bear children for her mistress reflects both loyalty and acceptance of ancient customs regarding servant obligations. The arrangement requires careful negotiation of emotions and expectations among all participants. Jacob must accept intimate relations with Bilhah, while understanding that any children belong to Rachel rather than their biological mother. Bilhah must surrender her offspring to her mistress while maintaining her servant status. Rachel must find satisfaction in vicarious motherhood through another woman's fertility. Bilhah's first pregnancy brings Rachel hope mixed with complex emotions about the artificial nature of her approaching motherhood. She will become a mother through legal fiction rather than biological reality, claiming children she did not conceive or carry. The arrangement satisfies social expectations while failing to address her deeper longing for personal fertility. The birth of Dan marks Rachel's entry into symbolic motherhood through surrogacy, though the experience cannot fully replace the biological motherhood she desires. She names the child with reference to divine justice. God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son. The name reflects her belief that surrogacy represents divine response to her desperate prayers. Community reaction to Rachel's use of surrogacy varies according to individual attitudes toward the practice and understanding of her desperate situation. Traditional voices approve of her resourcefulness in securing heirs despite barrenness, while others question whether such arrangements truly satisfy divine purposes regarding motherhood. The children's legal status as Rachel's sons is accepted despite their biological parentage. Bilhah's second pregnancy follows quickly, suggesting that divine favor accompanies Rachel's surrogacy strategy, even if it does not address her personal barrenness. Two sons through surrogacy provide Rachel with maternal status, while demonstrating that fertility issues affect her personally rather than indicating problems with Jacob's ability to father children. The birth of Naphtali prompts Rachel to name her second surrogate son with reference to her competition with Leah. With great wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed. The name acknowledges that surrogacy represents strategic victory in sibling rivalry rather than simple solution to barrenness. Rachel views motherhood as battleground where she can gain advantage over her more fertile sister. Jacob's relationship with Dan and Naphtali develops along different lines than his connection to Leah's sons, partly because their legal mother is the wife he loves, and partly because their conception resulted from Rachel's initiative rather than unwanted obligation. His emotional investment in these surrogate sons exceeds his feelings toward Leah's biological children. The household becomes increasingly complex as surrogate children join biological ones in creating extended family structure that challenges traditional definitions of parenthood and sibling relationships. Dan and Naphtali are legally Rachel's sons, but biologically Bilhah's children, brothers to Leah's sons through their shared father, but rivals through their competing mothers. Rachel's satisfaction with surrogacy proves temporary as the arrangement fails to address her core desire for personal fertility. Two legal sons provide social status and household position, but cannot satisfy her longing to experience pregnancy and birth herself. The surrogacy strategy succeeds practically while falling short emotionally. Leah observes Rachel's success with surrogacy and recognizes that the competition between them has entered a new phase. Her advantage through personal fertility has been challenged by Rachel's resourcefulness in obtaining children through other means. The rivalry that began over Jacob's affections now extends into competition for offspring and family influence. The stage is set for escalation of the sibling rivalry, as both sisters employ available means to gain advantage in their ongoing competition. Rachel's use of surrogacy has demonstrated that biological limitations need not determine final outcomes in family building. Leah will respond with her own strategic moves, ensuring that the competition continues and intensifies rather than resolving through Rachel's temporary success. The divine purposes working through these complicated family relationships will ultimately produce 12 sons who become fathers of tribes, but the immediate participants cannot see beyond their personal struggles and competitive instincts. Human rivalries serve cosmic plans through means that cause immediate suffering while achieving eternal purposes that transcend individual happiness or family harmony. Leah's countermove, more surrogacy and mandrakes. The household of Jacob had become a place where love moved like shadows on a wall. Each day brought new whispers, new glances, new attempts to capture what seemed forever out of reach. Leah watched her sister Rachel grow more desperate with each passing moon. The sight stirred something deep within her own heart. Beyond mere competition lay a woman's understanding of survival. Leah knew that children meant security in this ancient world. They meant a voice at the family table, a place of honor in the household hierarchy. More than status, they represented hope for the future. Each son would grow to protect and provide. Each daughter would strengthen family bonds through marriage. Rachel had given her maidservant Bilhah to Jacob. This act had produced two sons, Dan and Naphtali. The arrangement worked like a careful dance of substitution. Bilhah bore the children, but Rachel claimed them as her own. The legal customs of the time made this possible. A wife could expand her family through her servant's womb. Leah understood this game. She possessed her own maidservant, a young woman named Zilpah. The decision came naturally, like water flowing toward the lowest ground. If Rachel could multiply her household through surrogacy, then Leah would do the same. The competition had entered a new phase. Zilpah proved fertile and willing. Her first son arrived, healthy and strong. Leah named him Gad, declaring that good fortune had come to her. The name carried weight in the ancient tongue, the verb suggesting both luck and a troop of warriors. Leah envisioned her expanded family as a growing army of support. The second son from Zilpah followed soon after. Leah called him Asher, meaning happiness or blessedness. With this naming, she proclaimed her joy to the entire household. Through Zilpah, she had gained two more sons to add to her own four. The balance of power was shifting in her favor, but Rachel refused to surrender. The sisters circled each other like cautious animals, each seeking advantage. The household grew thick with unspoken tensions. Jacob moved between two worlds, trying to maintain peace while his heart remained firmly anchored to Rachel. The turning point came during harvest time. Young Reuben, Leah's firstborn, wandered through the fields as children do. His eyes caught sight of unusual plants growing wild among the grain. Mandrakes, they were called, small fruits that grew close to the earth. Their reputation preceded them through every ancient marketplace. These peculiar plants carried mysterious properties. Women whispered about their power to encourage fertility. The fruit resembled tiny apples with an intoxicating fragrance that seemed to promise secret blessings. Merchants traveled great distances to trade in mandrakes. Wealthy wives paid handsomely for even small portions. Reuben gathered the precious plants and brought them to his mother. His innocent gift would spark the most dramatic exchange yet between the two sisters. Leah received the mandrakes with growing excitement. She understood their value, both practical and symbolic. Rachel learned of the discovery within hours. The household servants carried news faster than wind across the courtyard. She approached Leah directly, something that rarely happened between them. The conversation would be remembered for generations. "Give me some of your son's mandrakes," Rachel pleaded. Her voice carried the desperation of years without children from her own body. The request revealed how deeply she believed in the plant's legendary power. Leah's response cut through the air like a blade. "Is it not enough that you have taken my husband? Would you also take my son's mandrakes?" The words exposed the wound that had festered for years. Jacob's preference for Rachel had created a chasm that no amount of children could bridge. But Rachel possessed something Leah wanted even more than mandrakes. Access to Jacob's bed had become a rare privilege for the unloved wife. Most nights, he went to Rachel's tent. Leah spent long hours alone, listening to the sounds of her sister's happiness drifting across the camp. The bargain struck between them revealed the depth of their mutual need. Rachel offered to trade a night with Jacob for a portion of the mandrakes. The exchange laid bare the economics of love in their polygamous household. Time with their husband had become a commodity to be bartered. "Very well," Rachel agreed. "Jacob can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." The deal was struck with businesslike efficiency. Both sisters believed they were gaining something precious. That evening, Leah met Jacob at the edge of their camp. Her words carried no romantic softness, only practical declaration. "You must come to me tonight, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." The phrasing spoke volumes about how transactional their marriage had become. Jacob complied with the arrangement. He had grown accustomed to the strange negotiations between his wives. Perhaps he understood that peace in the household required these careful balances of favor and attention. The night proved fruitful beyond expectation. Leah conceived her fifth son from this single encounter. She named him Issachar, a name that meant reward or wages. The The choice reflected her belief that divine justice had smiled upon her bargain. She had paid for Jacob's attention and received a child in return. Later, she bore a sixth son, whom she called Zebulun. This name meant dwelling or habitation. With six sons to her credit, Leah declared that surely Jacob would now make his home with her. The hope in her voice carried across the years, even though reality would prove different. Finally, Leah gave birth to a daughter named Dinah. The girl would grow to play her own role in the family's complex future. For now, she represented completion of Leah's childbearing achievements. 7 children had emerged from the unloved wife's determination to find her place. The Mandrake episode became legendary among the family's storytellers. It demonstrated how far desperation could drive two sisters who should have been allies. Both Rachel and Leah believed they had won something valuable from their exchange. Time would reveal the true costs of their competition. At last, Rachel bears a son. The seasons turned like pages in an endless book of waiting. Rachel carried her longing through each changing moon, each harvest celebration, each family gathering where children ran between the tents. Her arms ached with emptiness while her heart grew heavy with unfulfilled dreams. Divine timing moves according to purposes beyond human understanding. The ancient storytellers often spoke of remembering, not as simple recollection, but as decisive action. When the scriptures declare that the Almighty remembered someone, it signaled a moment of intervention, a turning of fortune's wheel. The moment arrived without fanfare or supernatural signs. Rachel's body, which had resisted pregnancy for so many years, finally yielded to new life. The conception came quietly, like dawn breaking over distant hills. She felt the familiar changes that other women described but had never experienced herself. News of Rachel's pregnancy spread through Jacob's household like ripples across still water. The servants whispered among themselves. Leah received the information with complex emotions that she kept carefully hidden. Jacob's joy burst forth like spring after a harsh winter. His beloved wife would finally bear him a child. The months of pregnancy passed with careful attention and gentle protection. Rachel became the center of household concern. Jacob hovered near her tent, ensuring her comfort and safety. The other wives and concubines watched this special treatment with varying degrees of acceptance and envy. Leah understood what this pregnancy meant for the family dynamics. Her own 6 sons and 1 daughter had given her status and security, but Rachel's first child would carry the weight of Jacob's deepest affections. This baby would be born into love that had waited nearly 2 decades to express itself through parenthood. The birth came after normal labor. Rachel's cries echoed across the camp as women gathered to assist with the delivery. The midwives worked with practiced hands while Jacob paced outside, unable to rest until word came of his wife's condition. When the baby emerged healthy and whole, the camp erupted in celebration. A son had been born to Rachel, the beloved wife. His cry announced not just another addition to Jacob's growing tribe, but the fulfillment of years of fervent prayer and desperate hope. Rachel held her newborn son with tears streaming down her face. The child represented more than personal victory over barrenness. He embodied the tangible proof that divine favor had finally turned toward her. The long years of watching other women nurse their babies had ended. The naming ceremony revealed Rachel's heart. She called her son Joseph, which carried multiple meanings in the ancient language. The name suggested adding or increasing, reflecting her hope that this child was merely the first of several to come. More significantly, it expressed her belief that her shame had been taken away. "The Almighty has taken away my reproach," Rachel declared to the gathered women. The words carried years of pain and social embarrassment. In her culture, childlessness was seen as divine disapproval or punishment. Joseph's birth restored her standing among her peers. But the name Joseph also contained Rachel's petition for the future. "May the Lord add to me another son," she prayed as she held the baby close. One child, however precious, could not completely satisfy the hunger that had grown during her barren years. She wanted the full experience of motherhood. Jacob's response to Joseph's birth revealed the depth of his favoritism. The child immediately became the center of his father's universe. Every gesture, every sound, every movement fascinated the proud father. Jacob saw in this boy the perfect combination of his own lineage and Rachel's beauty. The other children in the household watched their father's devotion to the new baby. Leah's sons, ranging from teenager Reuben down to little Zebulun, observed how differently Jacob treated Rachel's firstborn. The seeds of future conflict were planted in those early days of Joseph's life. Joseph grew surrounded by luxury and attention that his half-brothers had never experienced. Jacob commissioned the finest clothes for the boy. He spent hours teaching him about the family history, the stories of Abraham and Isaac. Every lesson carried the weight of special inheritance. Rachel blossomed in motherhood like a plant, finally receiving adequate water. The confidence that had attracted Jacob at the well returned with greater strength. She had proven her worth through this precious son. Her place in the family hierarchy became unshakable. The birth also marked a subtle shift in the relationship between the sisters. Leah had held the advantage through her fertility for many years. Her numerous children gave her practical power and social respect. Rachel's entry into motherhood changed the balance of their long competition. Yet even success could not heal all wounds. Rachel remained acutely aware that Leah had given Jacob 6 sons while she had produced only 1. The mathematical reality of the situation continued to influence household dynamics. Numbers still favored the unloved wife. Joseph's early years unfolded in an atmosphere of protective love and growing expectation. Jacob saw in this child the continuation of divine promises made to his grandfather Abraham and his father Isaac. The boy would inherit not just property, but the covenant relationship with the Almighty. The special treatment created ripples throughout the extended family. Servants learned to approach Joseph with particular deference. His half-brothers received clear signals about their father's preferences. The household adjusted to accommodate Jacob's overwhelming fondness for Rachel's son. Rachel treasured every moment of her new motherhood. She had waited so long for these simple pleasures: nursing a baby, watching first smiles, hearing initial attempts at speech. Each developmental milestone felt like a personal triumph over the years of disappointment. The broader family implications of Joseph's birth would unfold over decades. This child would grow to experience both the benefits and burdens of being the beloved son. His story would eventually encompass dreams, betrayal, slavery, and ultimately salvation for the entire family. For now, however, Rachel simply held her miracle baby and felt complete. The long chapter of barrenness had closed. A new story was beginning, one that would reshape the destiny of Jacob's household and influence the future of nations yet to be born. Departure from Laban, household idols, and hidden grudges. The years accumulated like dust on ancient roads. Jacob had served his father-in-law Laban for 2 full decades, working first for his wives, then for flocks and herds of his own. The arrangement had grown complicated with time, as agreements often do when they involve family members and questions of wealth. Prosperity had blessed Jacob's efforts beyond normal expectations. His flocks multiplied through careful breeding and what seemed like divine favor. The sheep grew fat, the goats produced abundant milk, and the cattle remained healthy through harsh seasons. Success marked every aspect of his husbandry, but prosperity creates its own problems, particularly when wealth grows unevenly between relatives. Laban watched his son-in-law's increasing fortune with growing unease. The old man began to notice how his own servants looked to Jacob for leadership, how merchants preferred dealing with the younger man's superior livestock. Tensions simmered beneath the surface of daily interactions. Laban changed Jacob's wages repeatedly, always finding new reasons to adjust their agreements. What began as honest business dealings gradually transformed into a careful dance of mutual suspicion and competing interests. Jacob sensed the shifting atmosphere around his father-in-law's household. Laban's sons made pointed comments about foreign relatives growing rich from their father's generosity. The women in the family whispered about divided loyalties and uncertain futures. Change hung in the air like storm clouds gathering on distant horizons. Divine instruction came to Jacob in the form of dreams and inner conviction. The message was clear. The time had arrived to return to the land of his birth, to reclaim the inheritance promised to his grandfather Abraham and his father Isaac. Canaan called to him across the years of exile. The decision to leave required careful planning and delicate negotiations with his wives. Jacob approached Rachel and Leah together, presenting his case like a lawyer arguing before judges. He reminded them of their father's changing attitude and his own divine calling to return home. Both sisters had grown weary of their father's manipulations over the years. Laban treated them more like property than daughters, using their marriages to advance his own economic interests. Their dowries had been consumed by family expenses rather than preserved for their security. Are we not considered foreigners by him? Rachel asked with bitter accuracy. For he has sold us and has indeed devoured our purchase price. The words revealed years of accumulated resentment against their father's treatment. Both women felt exploited by the man who should have protected their interests. Leah nodded in agreement with her sister's assessment. Despite their long rivalry, both understood their shared situation as daughters in a household where their father valued wealth above family loyalty. Their marriages had enriched Laban while leaving them dependent on their husband's success. The sisters gave their consent to Jacob's plan. They encouraged him to follow divine guidance and claim whatever wealth he could from their father's holdings. Whatever riches the Almighty has taken away from our father belong to us and our children, they declared with unified determination. Preparation for departure required absolute secrecy. Jacob could not risk Laban discovering the plan and preventing their escape through legal maneuvering or physical force. The old man possessed both the cunning and connections to make leaving difficult if he chose to intervene. The timing had to coincide with sheep shearing season, when Laban would travel to distant pastures for several days. This annual absence created the perfect opportunity for Jacob to gather his family and possessions without immediate detection. Every detail required careful coordination. Rachel made a decision that would later create unexpected complications. While packing her belongings, she secretly took her father's household gods, small idols that represented family inheritance and spiritual protection. These teraphim carried both religious significance and legal authority in property disputes. Her motivations for this theft remained complex. Perhaps she believed the idols belonged rightfully to her as Laban's daughter. Maybe she wanted insurance against future poverty or spiritual protection for the journey ahead. The household gods represented tangible connections to family heritage. The great escape unfolded like a carefully orchestrated migration. Jacob loaded his wives, children, servants, and livestock onto a caravan that stretched across the landscape. Camels carried precious belongings, while shepherds guided hundreds of animals toward the distant horizon. They crossed the Euphrates River and headed toward the hill country that marked the border between Laban's territory and the ancient land of promise. Each step carried them further from 20 years of complicated family relationships and closer to an uncertain but hopeful future. 3 days passed before Laban discovered their departure. Servants brought news that Jacob's entire household had vanished during the night, taking vast amounts of livestock and possessions. The old man's fury blazed like fire, consuming dry grass. Laban immediately organized a pursuit party and set out after his son-in-law's caravan. 7 days of hard riding brought him within sight of Jacob's company as they camped in the hill country. The confrontation that followed would test family bonds and divine protection. But before Laban could act on his anger, divine intervention shaped the encounter. A dream warned him against harming Jacob or speaking harshly about the departure. The Almighty had extended protection over the fleeing family, limiting what Laban could accomplish through force or intimidation. The meeting between father-in-law and son-in-law crackled with unresolved tensions. Laban accused Jacob of stealing away his daughters like captives of war, of denying him the opportunity to bid proper farewell to his grandchildren. His words mixed genuine hurt with calculated manipulation. Jacob defended his actions with equal passion. He recounted 20 years of faithful service, describing how he had protected Laban's flocks from predators and weather, accepting personal responsibility for every lost animal. His labor had enriched his father-in-law beyond measure. "These 20 years I have been with you," Jacob declared. "Your ewes and female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flocks. What was torn by beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss myself." His record of service spoke louder than accusations. But Laban raised a more serious charge that threatened to derail the entire negotiation. Someone had stolen his household gods, violating both hospitality and religious law. The theft represented not just missing property, but an insult to family honor and spiritual tradition. Jacob responded with confident indignation, unaware of Rachel's secret action. "With whomever you find your gods, he shall not live," he declared rashly. The pronouncement would carry prophetic weight that neither man understood at the moment. Laban searched through the entire camp systematically, checking tents and possessions with thorough determination. He examined Jacob's belongings, then moved to the quarters of the wives and servants. Each inspection brought him closer to Rachel's tent and the hidden idols. Rachel's deception during the search revealed both cleverness and desperation. She had hidden the household gods inside her camel's saddle and seated herself upon them. When Laban approached her tent, she claimed the inability to rise due to her monthly condition, a situation that required respectful distance, according to cultural customs. "Let my lord be angry that I cannot rise before you," Rachel said with perfect composure, "for the way of women is upon me." The excuse worked flawlessly, protecting both her theft and her father's dignity. Laban withdrew without examining her immediate area. The failed search left Laban frustrated and Jacob vindicated. The son-in-law's angry speech following the fruitless investigation further established his innocence in everyone's minds. Justice seemed to favor the departing family over their pursuing relatives. Tragedy on the road, Rachel's final days. The covenant ceremony between Jacob and Laban had settled their disputes and established boundaries for the future. Both men erected stone pillars as witnesses to their agreement, creating a permanent reminder of their reconciliation. The parting had been peaceful, even affectionate, despite years of accumulated grievance. Jacob's caravan resumed its journey toward the promised land with lighter hearts. The confrontation with Laban was behind them, and the road ahead promised reunion with family and inheritance of ancestral territories. Hope traveled with them like a welcome companion after years of uncertainty. Rachel rode among the women and children, her hand often resting on her growing belly. The Almighty had blessed her with a second pregnancy, answering her prayers from Joseph's birth years earlier. This child represented the completion of her dreams for motherhood and family legacy. The pregnancy progressed normally through the early months of travel. Rachel experienced the familiar discomforts and joys that marked the creation of new life. Joseph, now a young boy, showed excited anticipation about becoming an older brother. The family looked forward to another celebration of birth. But travel during pregnancy carried risks that modern medicine has largely eliminated. Ancient women faced childbirth with courage born from necessity, knowing that each delivery could bring either joy or tragedy. Rachel understood these dangers, but pressed forward with the family's migration. The caravan's pace accommodated her condition as much as possible. Jacob ordered frequent rest stops and ensured her comfort during the long days of movement. The extended family rallied around Rachel's needs, understanding her importance to Jacob's happiness and the household's stability. They had traveled far into the land of promise when Rachel's time arrived. The contractions began while the caravan was still some distance from Bethlehem, in the region that would later be called Ephrath. No proper dwelling was available, only the temporary shelter that nomadic families carried with them. The birth proved difficult from the beginning. Rachel's labor stretched through hours of increasing pain and danger. The midwives worked with practiced skill but growing concern as complications developed beyond their ability to manage safely. Ancient women often died in childbirth due to conditions that modern medicine handles routinely. Hemorrhaging, infection, and positioning problems claimed countless lives throughout history. Rachel faced these perils without the medical knowledge or equipment that might have saved her. As her strength faded, Rachel recognized the approaching end of her earthly journey. The baby was born alive and healthy, a son as she had hoped and prayed. But the cost of his arrival would be her own life, paid with the currency of maternal sacrifice. The midwife attempted to encourage Rachel during her final moments. "Do not fear," she said, "for you have another son." The words acknowledged both Rachel's previous prayers for additional children and her current achievement in bringing forth new life. Rachel used her remaining breath to name the child. With her last conscious act, she called him Ben-Oni, meaning son of my sorrow or son of my trouble. The name reflected her anguish at leaving him motherless and her grief at departing from the life she had fought so hard to build. Jacob could not bear to have his son carry such a sorrowful name throughout life. He changed it to Benjamin, meaning son of the right hand, or son of the south. The new name suggested strength, favor, and hope for the future rather than the tragedy that marked his birth. Rachel's death shattered Jacob's world in ways that 20 years of marriage had not prepared him to handle. She had been the love of his youth, the reason for his exile, the motivation for his years of labor. Her loss created a wound that would never fully heal. The burial took place beside the road to Bethlehem, far from the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham and Sarah rested, where Isaac and Rebekah lay buried. Jacob erected a pillar over Rachel's grave, marking the spot where his beloved wife would wait for resurrection. The location of Rachel's burial carried symbolic weight that extended far beyond the immediate tragedy. She was laid to rest in the territory that would belong to her son, Benjamin, creating a maternal presence in the land her descendants would inherit. The family's mourning period reflected the depth of their loss. Rachel had been more than Jacob's favorite wife. She had been the emotional center of his personal happiness. Her death left him a widower in spirit, even though he still had Leah and the concubines as wives. Joseph and Benjamin became living memorials to their mother's memory. Jacob's love for Rachel transferred to her sons with an intensity that would shape family dynamics for generations. The boys carried not only their mother's beauty, but also their father's overwhelming affection. Leah faced a complex mix of emotions regarding her sister's death. Years of rivalry and jealousy had created genuine animosity between them. Yet Rachel's passing also brought profound sadness for the relationship they had never been able to heal and the sister she had lost forever. The household dynamics shifted dramatically after Rachel's death. Leah became the senior wife by default, but Jacob never transferred his emotional attachment to her. He remained devoted to Rachel's memory and her children, especially the motherless Benjamin, who reminded him most of his lost love. The tragedy marked a turning point in Jacob's spiritual journey as well. The man who had wrestled with divine messengers and received the name of sanctification now grappled with the mystery of suffering and loss. Faith would need to encompass grief as well as blessing. Benjamin grew up knowing his mother only through stories and his father's tears. The boy became precious beyond measure to Jacob, not just as Rachel's son, but as the living reminder of the woman who had made his life complete. This favoritism would create its own complications in years to come. Rachel's death demonstrated the harsh realities of ancient life, where women frequently paid the ultimate price for bringing children into the world. Her sacrifice ensured the continuation of the family line, but at a cost that left permanent scars on those who survived her. The sisters, sons, and the future of nations. The tents of Jacob stretched across the landscape like a small city, housing the descendants who would reshape the ancient world. 12 sons had emerged from the complex relationships between their father and his wives, each boy carrying the genetic inheritance of both Abraham's covenant line and the strong-willed women who had competed for love and status. Time had proven the ultimate judge of the sisters' rivalry. Rachel lay buried beside the road to Bethlehem, her grave marked by a stone pillar that would endure for centuries. Leah had outlived her sister by many years, eventually taking her place beside Jacob in the ancestral burial cave at Machpelah. The irony was not lost on those who remembered both women. Rachel, the beloved wife for whom Jacob had labored 14 years, rested alone in the territory of Benjamin. Leah, the unloved but faithful mother of 6 sons, shared eternal rest with the husband who had never truly cherished her in life. But death had a way of equalizing what life had made unequal. Both sisters had contributed to the miraculous multiplication of Abraham's descendants. Their combined offspring numbered 12 sons and at least 1 daughter, creating the foundation for a great nation that would influence world history. Reuben, Leah's firstborn, carried the natural rights of primogeniture, but would later forfeit them through moral failure. His position as Jacob's eldest son had seemed to guarantee leadership of the family, but character flaws would derail his inheritance and transfer authority to younger brothers. Simeon and Levi, also sons of Leah, would become known for their violent temperaments and quick anger. Their revenge against the city of Shechem for their sister Dinah's violation would demonstrate both family loyalty and dangerous lack of restraint. These traits would shape their tribal destinies. Judah, Leah's fourth son, would emerge as the most significant of all the brothers from a historical perspective. His leadership qualities and willingness to take responsibility would elevate him above his older siblings. Through Judah's lineage would come kings and ultimately the promised Messiah. Dan and Naphtali, Rachel's sons through her servant Bilhah, would establish northern territories and become known for their warrior abilities. Dan's descendants would produce judges and fighters, while Naphtali's tribe would occupy beautiful mountain regions and provide swift messengers. Gad and Asher, Leah's sons through her servant Zilpah, would settle on opposite sides of the land of promise. Gad's territory would lie east of the Jordan River, producing fierce soldiers. Asher's inheritance would include rich coastal lands that produced abundant food and royal delicacies. Issachar and Zebulun, Leah's final biological sons, would represent the balance between agricultural strength and commercial enterprise. Issachar would become associated with hard work and seasonal wisdom, while Zebulun would control important trade routes and harbor cities. Joseph, Rachel's firstborn, had already begun to show the special destiny that would make him second ruler of Egypt and savior of his entire family during years of famine. His dreams and interpretive abilities marked him as divinely chosen for extraordinary service. Benjamin, Rachel's final gift to the family, would grow to lead a small but fierce tribe known for its warriors and strategic importance. The territory of Benjamin would later house the Holy City and become the bridge between northern and southern kingdoms. Dinah, the only mentioned daughter among Jacob's children, represented the vulnerable position of women in ancient society. Her story would illustrate both the protective instincts of her brothers and the complex negotiations required for female honor and family alliances. The 12 sons would eventually migrate to Egypt during years of severe famine, where Joseph's position would enable their survival and multiplication. They would grow from a single family into tribes numbering in the hundreds of thousands over the course of several centuries. Each tribal group would develop distinct characteristics and specializations. Some would become known for military prowess, others for religious service, still others for trade and commerce. The diversity of gifts and abilities would create a balanced and resilient national identity. The territories they would inherit centuries later would reflect both their individual natures and their ancestral mother's influence. Leah's sons would dominate the Central Highlands and provide both political and religious leadership. Rachel's sons would control important economic regions and maintain special relationships with ruling powers. Divine promises to Abraham about multiplication and national greatness found fulfillment through these 12 men and their descendants. The stars of heaven and sand of the seashore became appropriate metaphors for the countless people who would trace their ancestry back to Jacob's household. But numbers alone could not capture the full significance of what emerged from the sisters' competition. The 12 tribes would become the vehicle for preserving and transmitting divine revelation to the ancient world. Through them would come prophets, priests, kings, and ultimately the Savior of all nations. The rivalry between Rachel and Leah had seemed petty and destructive during their lifetimes. Their constant competition for Jacob's attention created household tension and emotional pain for all involved. Yet divine providence used even their jealousy to accomplish purposes far beyond their understanding. Modern readers might wonder, what would have happened if Jacob had married only one woman as originally intended? Would the family have remained small and insignificant? Would the great migration to Egypt have been necessary? Would the foundation for a chosen nation have been as strong? Instead, the complicated dynamics of polygamy and sister rivalry produced exactly the number and variety of sons needed for the next phase of divine plans. Each boy brought unique strengths that would prove essential for survival and growth in hostile environments. The sisters themselves had unwittingly become architects of national destiny. Leah's persistence and fertility provided the majority of tribal leaders. Rachel's beauty and Jacob's devotion produced the son who would save them all from famine and the son whose territory would house the temple. Their story teaches timeless lessons about how human weaknesses and failures can serve larger purposes. Divine sovereignty works through flawed people and complicated situations to achieve perfect results. What seems like chaos in the moment often reveals intricate design from a broader perspective. The graves of both sisters remained landmarks for centuries, reminding later generations of the women whose competition and cooperation had given birth to their nation. Rachel's tomb became a place of pilgrimage and prayer, while Leah's resting place symbolized faithful service finally rewarded. In the end, both women received what they had sought most desperately during their lifetimes. Rachel achieved the motherhood that had eluded her for so many years. Leah found the honor and recognition that had been withheld during her marriage. Death and time revealed the true value of their contributions to the family legacy. Their sons would face their own trials and triumphs in the generations to come. Slavery, exodus, conquest, kingdom, exile, and restoration would test the strength of their foundations. But the roots planted by two sisters who fought for love would prove deep enough to sustain a people through every historical challenge. The story of Rachel and Leah ultimately transcends their personal struggles to illustrate how individual lives connect to eternal purposes. Their rivalry produced the building blocks of a nation that would bless all the families of the earth, exactly as promised to their husband's grandfather, Abraham, generations before their birth.